This is Miss McCant, and today we're going to be looking at adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So there's two things to consider when you're adding mixed numbers. If you're adding mixed numbers, you want to add the whole numbers first. So 2 wholes plus 1 whole is 3 wholes. Your denominator is going to stay the same because in 4th grade we only work with like denominators. So that doesn't change. That fifth stays fifths. And then you add the numerators. So 3 plus 1 would be 4 fifths. If you get a fraction, a mixed number like this, you can leave it alone because it's proper and it's mixed correctly. Now, if you have a problem like this, again, you want to add those whole numbers, but this time, denominator stays the same. When we add our numerators, we get 7. We cannot leave a numerator larger than a denominator. That is an improper fraction. Therefore, we're going to have to change this. This is not correct. You cannot leave this. So there's a difference between these two and knowing when you have to change if it's an improper fraction. So we know that 5 fifths equals another whole. So we're going to take these two and add those wholes together. So that gives me 4 wholes. And I'm going to take away this whole, this 5 fifths from this 7 fifths. So that's going to leave me with 2 fifths. Now that creates a proper mixed number. So instead of 3 and 7 fifths, that correct answer would be 4 and 2 fifths. With subtracting, again, you have two different ways. You can subtract without, if regrouping is not needed, and then you may have to subtract with regrouping. So without regrouping, we'll use that same example, would look like this. So subtract your whole numbers first. 2 minus 1 is 1. And then that 5 denominator, that fifth stays the same. My numerator, 3 minus 1, is 2. So that leaves 1 and 2 fifths, which works without any regrouping because this numerator was bigger than this numerator. Now, if I did have to borrow, so we'll flip these fractions. So we'll say 2 and 1 fifth minus 1 and 3 fifths. So this time we have to borrow because we can't subtract a 1 numerator to a 3 numerator. You can't subtract 1 minus 3. So we have to do some borrowing. Typical borrowing, which your child is used to, would be borrowing a 10. With fractions, you don't borrow a 10. You borrow whatever equals the whole. So remember we talked about with fifths, that whole is 5 fifths. If it's 8, that whole would be 8 eighths. If it's thirds, that whole would be 3 thirds. So this one, your whole is 5 fifths. So this is going to become a 1 because that's who I'm borrowing from. And I'm going to add a 5 fifths to this 1 fifth because that whole that I borrowed becomes this. So now this becomes 1 and 6 fifths. So 2 and 1 fifth is equivalent to 1 and 6 fifths. Then I could subtract. Now I can subtract 1 minus 1, my wholes, which would leave me with 0. And 6 fifths minus 3 fifths would leave me with 3 fifths. So another example of that with regrouping, I'll show you one more. Let's do 4 and 4 sixths minus 1 and 5 sixths. Okay, so we can't subtract 4 minus 5, so we're going to have to borrow. So that 4 becomes a 3. We're borrowing that whole. To make that whole, we're going to add a 6 sixth here. So 4/6 plus that whole that I borrowed, 6/6, becomes 10/6. Then I can subtract 1 and 5/6. So 3 minus 1 is 2. 10 minus 5 is 5. And that denominator stays the same, 6. So this would be the ultimate answer. Sorry, 5/6. This would be the answer after I did my borrowing.